Imagine this. You are faced with a challenge, a dream, or a seemingly insurmountable obstacle. You might feel overwhelmed, questioning whether your prayers will be answered. But let me tell you, my friend, faith is the key that unlocks the door of miracles. In a world where doubts and uncertainties often cloud our minds, it's essential to remember that God is still working in our lives. Even when things seem impossible or hope feels distant, it's crucial to believe and trust in His divine plan. So, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. In times of adversity, our faith can be tested. However, it is during those challenging moments that our trust in God is vital. By holding on to our belief in His power and love, we find strength and resilience to navigate through the storm. Trusting that God will make us whole again helps us endure hardships with hope and perseverance. When we desire restoration, it is natural to seek immediate results. However, trusting in God's timing is crucial. His plans unfold according to His perfect wisdom, and the healing process may take time. By patiently waiting and trusting in His divine timing, we allow God's transformative work to take place, leading us to the wholeness. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 8. In a world driven by social media and constant connection, it's hard to avoid the impact of comparison in our lives. We find ourselves constantly comparing our achievements, appearances, and lifestyle to those of others. And it's taking a toll on our mental well-being. But what exactly is the impact of comparison, and how can we overcome its negative effects? The world we live in, it's constantly encourages us to compare ourselves to others. We often lose sight of our true worth and purpose. But when we invite God's presence in our life, a transformative journey begins. The Bible provides timeless wisdom on the power of God's presence and how it can transform our perspective on comparison. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Psalm chapter 139, verse 14. My children, do not be deceived by the appearances or measure your worth by the offerings you bring. I do not look at the size of your gifts, but at the sincerity of your hearts. God's presence is the ultimate source of fulfillment and joy. The urge to compare ourselves is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. As social beings, we have a natural tendency to evaluate ourselves in relation to others. However, in today's hyper-connected world, this inclination has intensified, leading to a range of psychological effects. Comparison serves several functions in our lives. Firstly, it helps us evaluate our abilities, achievements, and social standings. It can be a source of motivation and inspiration. However, when taken to extremes, comparison can lead to feeling of inferiority, jealousy, and self-doubt. Several factors influence the psychological effects of comparison. Firstly, social media plays a significant role. It presents a curated version of people's life, leading to an unrealistic comparison and feelings of inadequacy. Additionally, our own self-esteem, personal goal, and the presence of social support system can affect how we interpret and react to comparisons. When we shift our focus from comparing ourselves to others, instead embrace our unique gifts and blessings, we find freedom and peace. God's love and acceptance are not based upon our worldly achievements, but on our sincere hearts and our willingness to seek His presence above everything else. Instead of comparing ourselves to others, we should focus on embracing our own uniqueness and appreciating the qualities that make us who we are. Remember that God has a specific plan and purpose for your life that is different from anyone else's. When we constantly seek validation and approval from others, we can easily become trapped in the cycle of comparison. Instead, shift your focus towards seeking God's approval. Remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in His image, and His opinion of you is what truly matters. Find comfort in knowing that you are loved and accepted by the Creator of the universe. Cultivate an attitude of gratitude that can help combat the comparison trap. Instead of dwelling on what others have or have achieved, focus on the blessings in your own life. Through a deepening relationship with God, we can gain clarity, direction, and ease in our decision making and live a life that honors and glorifies Him. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Take time to count your blessings and express gratitude to God for His provisions. Contentment comes when we recognize and appreciate what we already have, rather than constantly desiring what other possesses. Instead of feeling envious and threatened by others' success, choose to celebrate with them. Rejoicing in the achievements of others demonstrates a heart of love and support. Remember that everyone's journey is different, and their success do not diminish your worth and potential. Overcoming the comparison trap requires a renewal of mind. Regularly immerse yourself in God's Word, seeking His truth and wisdom. Replace negative and comparison-driven thoughts with positive and affirming one. God's love and guidance are unique to each individual. By embracing your blessings, focusing on your relationship with God, practicing gratitude and contentment, trusting His plan, celebrating others, seeking His perspective, releasing the need of approval, and renewing your mind with His words, you can navigate the comparison trap and live in the fullness of His love and guidance. Gideon was a man from the tribe of Manasseh who was called by God to lead the Israelites in battle against Midianites. At first, Gideon was unsure whether he had heard from God correctly, so he asked for a sign to confirm God's will. He placed a fleece of wool on the ground and asked God to make the fleece wet with dew while keeping the ground around it dry. God granted his request, and the fleece was wet while the ground was dry. Still uncertain, Gideon asked for another sign. This time he asked that the fleece be dry while the ground around it was wet. God granted his request again. Gideon was now certain that God was with him and that he was being called to lead the Israelites in battle. Through Gideon's story, we see that discerning God's will often requires patience, humility, and a willingness to seek confirmation. Gideon did not immediately rush into the battle, but instead sought confirmation from God through the two signs with the fleece. In doing so, he showed that he was willing to submit to God's will and follow his guidance. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. Romans chapter 12 verse 2. In a small village nestled amidst rolling hills, there lived a humble and kind-hearted man named Samuel. Samuel has faced numerous trials and tribulations throughout his life. Yet his unwavering faith in God gave him strength to persevere. One fateful day, a devastating storm swept across the village, leaving destructions in its wake. Samuel's modest home was reduced to rubble, his crops were ruined and his livestock perished. Overwhelmed by sorrow and despair, Samuel fell to his knees and cried out to God, "Why have you forsaken me? How will I ever recover from this tragedy?" Days turned into weeks, and Samuel remained despondent, finding it difficult to see a glimmer of hope amidst the ruins of his life. However, unbeknownst to him, God had heard his prayers and was already at work behind the scenes. One morning, as Samuel walked through the remnants of his village, he noticed a group of volunteers arriving. They were part of a relief organization sent by compassionate souls from distant lands. With their help, a new sense of hope began to flicker within Samuel's heart. The volunteers started to rebuild homes, clear debris, and plant new seeds in the once barren fields. Samuel joined hands with them, pouring his sweat and determination into the restoration efforts. Day by day, the village began to transform. From the ashes of devastation, new structures emerged, beaming with life and laughter. As time went on, Samuel witnessed countless miracles unfold before his eyes. The crops flourished more abundantly than ever before, yielding an abundance of food for the village. The villagers' spirit was rekindled, and a newfound sense of community and resilience spread like wildfire. Amidst the restoration, Samuel realized that God's plan was not just about rebuilding physical structures. It was about healing hearts, renewing spirits, and restoring faith. The title, "God Will Restore You," took on a profound meaning for Samuel and his fellow villagers. They understood that God's restoration went far beyond material possessions. It encompassed the restoration of hope, joy, and purpose. Years passed, and Samuel's village became the testament of God's faithfulness and restoration. The once shattered lives had been transformed into a vibrant community filled with love, compassion, and unwavering faith. Samuel, now an elder in the village, shared his story with the younger generations, reminding them that no matter how broken they may feel, God's restoration is always possible. And so, the tale of Samuel and his village serves as a timeless reminder that even in the darkest of times, when all seems lost, God's restoring power can breathe life into our shattered dreams and make us whole once again. As you discern God's will, it is important to surrender your plans and desires to Him. This means trusting that God's plan for your life is greater than your own and being willing to follow His lead even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Aligning your purpose with God's will also involves living a life that is in accordance with His values and commands. This means seeking to love God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. It also means living a life that is characterized by humility, obedience and service. When you align your purpose with God's will, you will find joy and fulfillment and a sense of purpose that can only come from living a life that is fully devoted to Him. As you seek God's guidance, it is important to examine your motives for pursuing a particular career path. Ask yourself whether your career choices align with God's value or whether they will allow you to use your own talents and gifts to serve others. Seeking God's guidance for career choices involves asking for His wisdom and discernment in choosing the best path for your professional life. It means recognizing that God has a plan for your life and that this plan includes your career. You should also consider your skills, interests, and passions as well as your personal values and priorities. Reflect on how these factors can align with God's plan for your life and how they can enable you to use your career to make a positive impact on the world. God called Jonah, a prophet, to preach the people of Nineveh, a city known for its wickedness. However, Jonah did not want to obey God's command. He tried to flee from God by boarding a ship to Tarshish. While on the ship, a great storm arose and the sailors were afraid for their lives. They eventually realized that Jonah was the cause of the storm and they threw him overboard. Jonah was then swallowed by a large fish and spent 3 days and nights in its belly. During this time, Jonah realized his disobedience and repented, praying to God for forgiveness. God then had the fish spit Jonah out onto the shore. After this experience, Jonah obeyed God's command and preached to the people of Nineveh. To his surprise, the people repented of their wickedness and God showed them mercy. Through Jonah's story, we see that discerning God's will often requires obedience and repentance. Jonah initially tried to run away from God's call, but he eventually realized his mistake and repented. Only then was he able to discern God's will and fulfill his calling. As we face uncertainty, we can turn to God for comfort and guidance. We can pray for His wisdom and discernment, and we can trust that He will provide for our needs, even when we cannot see a way forward. To trust God in the midst of uncertainty, we must first cultivate a relationship with Him through prayer. Reading the Bible. This involves seeking to understand His character, values and desires, and seeking to align our own lives with His will. We can also find strength in God's promises, which reminds us of His faithfulness and love. For example, we can cling to the verses such as Romans chapter 8 verse 28, which tells us God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose.